Hey there, everybody. This is Kenny. Welcome back to another edition of the Leading from the Middle podcast. This is the podcast for middle managers who want to develop themselves, develop their teams, and improve their results. I got to talk to the CEO and founder at Clockwork Interactive, Nancy Lyons. Nancy's also an author, and Nancy gave some great advice about the current workplace culture and how you can build it and make it so much better so that employees are running to come to work. She talked about being inclusive, flexible, adaptable. She talked about the shifts that are happening right now in modern leadership. How do you have accountability? How do you future-proof yourself? And what is intrapreneurship? I hope I said that right. Let's get at it. You don't want to miss a second.
This episode is brought to you by Kitcaster. Kitcaster books you on top podcasts. How do funded startup founders attract prospects and talent? Podcast interviews. How do entrepreneurs with exits find new deals? Podcast interviews. How do C-suite execs differentiate in crowded markets? Podcast interviews. Kitcaster books you on top podcasts. Click the link in the show notes for a special offer. Celebrate good conversation.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of the Leading from the Middle podcast. I have got a tremendous leader with us today who's going to share a lot of knowledge from her experience, but a lot of knowledge also from the teaching that she's doing today. And so we're going to find out a lot about her and grab some great advice from her today. So I want to introduce the CEO and founder at Clockwork Interactive. Nancy Lyons has joined me today. Nancy, it is so great to have you on. How you doing?
Hey, thanks, Kenny. I'm glad to be here. I'm great. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. I really want to grab your backstory first, because I think in your backstory, there's some lessons along the way and some things about having some terrible jobs that's kind of led you really to do a lot of what you're doing now, which is helping a lot of people. So tell us a little bit about your backstory and what led you to start the company that you started now.
Sure. Well, I think, like a lot of young people, I sort of came up not really clear on what I wanted to do. I like to perform. I was a fine arts student. So theatrical arts was the direction that I decided to pursue. So I was actually a theater major in college. And I like to bring that up because I think it's important for young people to be aware that there is no clear single path to success, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think lots of people, their careers happen by accident. And I think we have to be open to the accidents that might happen to us. And so I was a theater major with a media studies minor, and I started to do marketing and industrial video production. And so, the hard jobs that I had are also jobs that I probably wouldn't change. First of all, I was a food server for years, starting in high school, late high school, and through college. And up until I started my career, really, I supplemented my income, even I did a lot of performing. I supplemented all of that by working in the restaurant industry. And I recommend that every single person who wants to be a leader in the context of any career work in food service for a period of time, because right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you have a boss, you have managers. Most of them have been trained through some sort of restaurant training program, but, I dare say not many of them have very strong people skills. And then I also think that your customer is your boss, which is a lesson you learn right away and you never forget. That translates into all aspects of just about any career. And you learn how to make the customer happy, how to get them engaged, how to have albeit short term, a relationship with them.
Yeah.
And, in the context of food service, I worked with a lot of controlling, entitled, shaming, bossy, inflexible, disrespectful managers who just got their jobs because they were there the longest.
Wow.
So I have been treated every which way but loose, right? Like in the context of food service. And then when I was doing marketing and industrial videos, what I can tell you is I learned very early that there are very few women, and this was many years ago, it was 20, 25, 27 years ago. There were very few women. I was young, but I didn't have any women to mentor me. There were no women directors. There were very few women, and none in my market that owned shops that produced those sorts of videos. And so I found myself working with a lot of men who weren't really interested in changing the statistics for women in that industry. So, I remember I started a job and was hired right around the same time as a gentleman that I actually knew sort of well. And we started in similar positions, and he was treated absolutely the opposite of me. I was asked to pick up our boss's children at daycare. I was asked to, pick up dry cleaning, fill up his tank. My colleague was asked to show up on site for shoots and was given almost immediate respect and was just talked to in a very different way than I was.
Wow.
And so all of those experiences, I think, informed the kind of leader that I wanted to be and helped me think about, in a really active way, how I wanted to show up in service for the people that ended up being my direct reports at some point. So nothing terribly dramatic or exciting, but a lot of experiences with people who were really never taught the difference between managing and leading, or
Yes.
controlling and being a leader.
Yes. Yes. Wow, Nancy, thank you for being so transparent. And it's so many things that went on back then, and unfortunately, some of those things still happen today. And
Mm-hmm.
boy, but you dead on. I spent my first 10 years or so of my career working at McDonald's, and then at Red Lobster and Bennigan's for several years. So you're 100% right. That is quite an awakening, and but you
Mm-hmm.
can take a lot and learn a lot from the food industry for sure. Um, and so now, so you saw Clockwork Interactive. What does Clockwork Interactive do?
Well, thanks. Thanks for asking. Clockwork is an experience design and technology consultancy. So we solve complex problems for the enterprise. And that can look like creating a strategy for a digital product. It can be designing and engineering a digital product and launching it. It could be a very complicated website. For instance, we've done a large urban cities website with, literally 300,000 pages of content. We have developed very significant apps for large healthcare organizations to help patients manage their own healthcare. We've developed sales enablement platforms for large organizations with franchises, or large organizations with dealerships all over the globe, or organizations with anywhere from 15,000 to 60,000 salespeople on teams all over the globe. So, we also have a change enablement practice, which helps to ensure that the investment our clients make in the technology will actually work, because we bring the people along. So we really focus on people, process, and technology inside of large organizations, and in that order.
Yeah, I'm so glad you explained that, because this is what I find, among a lot of things, fascinating about you and your leadership, because you've got this great technology that you do. But what did you just say? You said people first, and then you talk so much about some really great people skills that we need to have. And I want to start to get your advice on that, as well as building that great culture. Um, you talk a lot about the leader today has to be inclusive. It's not an option. Inclusive, flexible, and adaptable. Talk a little bit about those skills that leaders really need to have, and what are some hints and tips there on some measuring sticks on whether they are being inclusive enough, flexible enough, or adaptive enough.
Sure. Well, I think that our culture in the United States has really come up around this idea of comfort, right? We have built whole communities and we have built institutions around this idea of creating comfort for the people involved in them. And comfort, I think, it is centered around a certain entitlement. In other words, and I do this talk a lot. I do a lot of public speaking, and I do one particular talk about cultivating human-centered cultures. And the through line through everything I say in that talk is really about creating cultures of non-judgment, right? Because we don't judge a person often based on their skills or their contribution. We judge them based on how like us they are and how like us they perform. And I find it sort of interesting that when we talk about creating inclusivity and cultures of belonging, first of all, we make it an island, right? It's a thing, it's an initiative that somebody over here is doing. Second of all, I think we focus a lot on race and ethnicity in a way that suggests we've never done it before, which to me is sort of tragic. And then we want to get a lot of brownie points for it, if you will. And first of all, I think building cultures of inclusion and belonging has to be an everybody thing. It can't be a thing that happens someplace else. It also can't be a thing that will get sacrificed in next year's budget if we're seeing a hard time. Because I think the reality is, if we can't see the value of that internally, we must see the value of it externally. And that is any product or service that we build in any industry is meant for a diverse population. And the builders of that, the creators of that, the managers of that have got to reflect the communities, the customers that we serve in order to ensure the integrity of the end product. So I talk about it a lot because that judgment piece is really this unspoken, unsung reality that pushes people to react to others in a way that isn't healthy or conducive to inclusivity. In other words, if I always use myself as an example. I'm a big girl, right? Big woman, larger woman, not huge, but big. I'm a big personality. I walk in the door and I've got a loud voice. I am relatively outspoken. And, I was just in Tucson yesterday giving a talk. And the thing that seemed to resonate with the audience pretty significantly was this idea of being too much, too big, too masculine, too, large, too loud, and we don't like that. Most cultures don't like that. Or women, I was too masculine. I was never feminine enough. I never had the right shoes or the right suit. And I would be judged based on that.
Wow.
And I think we do it all the time in our hiring decisions. Do you make me feel comfortable? If you're not different from me, you are actually a leg ahead of somebody who might present differently, either in how they show up, either in their physical presentation, whatever it is. We think about our own comfort first. And I think that's where this word fit, we talk a lot about cultural fit inside of organizations, but fit isn't something we should be striving for. Contribution is what we should be striving for. And sometimes contribution comes in the form of differing opinions or different life experience or challenges that perhaps we hadn't anticipated. And that is good. That is a good thing. And so I think that people have to have in their desire to lead, they also have to grow their self-awareness and recognize when they are pushing back on the other, whatever that is. I mean, in our culture, we have this deep desire, and this is across all business, all industry, to other people. And that's essentially what we're talking about. I think this country is tragically behind in some significant conversations that we must have. I don't care if people don't like people that are not like them. They're not going anywhere. And the other thing that I think is really important is something that we forget, and that is all humans are good and valuable because they were born. That's it.
Absolutely.
That's it. Right?
Absolutely.
Not because you decide they are.
Absolutely.
And for some reason, and it's very much rooted, grounded in, some stuff that I probably shouldn't even bring up on your podcast, but it's rooted in whiteness, frankly.
Mhm.
And it shows up in all organizations. And I'm not a DEI speaker, but I am somebody who tries to hold people and to get people to hold themselves accountable for
Mm.
how they're showing up at work, regardless of their position or their title. And so, I think letting go of judgment, growing self-awareness, being aware of the importance of emotional intelligence, recognizing the value of people regardless of their background or their experience. Are they going to challenge you? Will they show up with a significant contribution? That's how we should judge those folks that we determine that are appropriate to add to our teams.
That
So
is
sorry, it's a little
awesome.
long-winded and I
No,
tend to get
no,
on the
not at
soapbox,
all.
but
That was perfect, Nancy. And you said so much there that really I think if you're doing all the things you just said, then you can be more flexible and be more adaptable. And then I think the inclusion piece will come alongside there. I have to ask you this because you do a lot of speaking and you get around to a lot of different companies. Are you optimistic on this next generation coming up? Are you seeing what you're talking about, some really good signs on this next generation that's entering the workforce now?
absolutely, absolutely. I feel comfort in knowing that the next generation coming into the workforce is far more interested and, dare I say, energized by difference than any of the generations before them.
Hmm.
And I make a joke. I spoke at an organization recently, and they said, "What do leaders have to do to open up organizations to this promise of the future?" And I made a very inappropriate joke and said, "Well, some leaders have to die." And the whole audience was like, "Oh, I can't believe she said that." And yet, metaphorically speaking, it's kind of true. Like we need old guard leadership to transition out, and people who are more interested in the humanity of organizations to come in and take over the wheel. And just like I said, I was in Tucson yesterday, so this is top of mind. When I got done with my talk, and that particular talk was on fear and building resiliency. And the talk is called Kick Your Fear in the Face. And I had so many people come up to me afterwards to say, "Oh my gosh, you're my people." Because the thing that resonated with them was this idea of being too much or being too loud or being too whatever, their gifts are. And I believe that the two is probably your superpower. And most of these people were young people, and most of them felt energized, but also liberated by that point in the talk. And that's what they expressed to me. And that leads me to believe I'm on the right track.
You are. Oh man. That's so awesome. Um, Nancy, how do I hold myself accountable so how do I measure it? Is this a culture thing? That I look at the culture, which will lead to great results? How do I measure myself that I'm not looking at someone that is to this or to that? Um, and how do I build that type of culture where we're all holding each other accountable?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think accountability is a really nebulous word in today's workforce, right? Like nobody knows what that means. If I'm accountable, does that
Yes.
mean I'm fired? I'm not
Yeah.
going to raise my hand because I might lose my job. I'm not going to own a failure because that might count against me. And so I think accountability is a question that every organization has to ask. What does it look like for us? How do we show up being accountable? How do we grow our self-awareness to know when, we have to step up and own something? And how do we create a culture of psychological safety so that people feel okay saying, "Okay, I made a mistake. I made a mistake there." What does that look like? And then how do we learn from it collaboratively? I think those are important questions to ask. I also think that values, most organizations espouse values, And yet most of them sort of see them as marketing speak. I ask a lot of audiences, what are your organizational values? Do you know them? And very few people can raise their hands in those, and it's a special company or organization that I see or meet or talk to when the majority actually do raise their hands. That's when you know that they have a hiring strategy that aligns with their values. They're hiring people that reflect those values, and those people take an active role in doing exactly that. They recognize that responsibility. So, excuse me, I think it starts with your values. I think that hiring strategy piece, whether you're global or you're tiny, is just as important. I think recognizing that leadership needs to show up at all levels of the organization, whether their title suggests they're a leader or not, is really important. Then I also think there's some personal work that people have to do, and that includes seeking therapy. Like if you've been given feedback forever and ever that suggests you're a very defensive person, or like for me, pardon me, I want to be an active listener, but sometimes I get so excited about something, right, that I start jumping in. And that's something that I had to grow awareness around, so that I gave people an opportunity to really speak their mind. And, in the 20 years that I've been working on that particular issue of mine, I've gotten feedback that suggests I've become a better listener. But that's not for the organization to teach me. It's
Yeah.
for me to recognize the value myself and pursue that opportunity for growth.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of leaders miss that, right? That emotional intelligence, that self-awareness. But more importantly, a lot of leaders miss, hey, maybe I need to seek some help on this, and this is something the company's not going to really help me out with. I need to go and get some help on this. This has been so amazing. I want to get a couple of more questions in, and I want to make sure I leave plenty of time for you to talk about your book and how people can work with you. But can the old guard change? Have you seen some leaders that have done it one way, that have maybe been in the workforce since the 80s or 90s and have done it one way, but have seen that, hey, I need to shift over this way? Is that even possible?
Sure. I mean, I think humans are adaptable, but they have to want to be.
Okay.
And they have to embrace the discomfort that comes along with change. I also think recognizing the value in change is the first thing that is required of those folks that are challenged by it. I do think that there are a lot of the old guard, and I'm thinking about boomers very particularly,
Yes.
but also some Gen X folks. I'm a Gen Xer. I feel like the Gen X folks sort of opened the door to disruption.
Yes.
They weren't as vocal or as loud about it as some upcoming generations, but they definitely made it clear that conforming across the board was probably not something we were going to do. And the internet, I've grown up career-wise on the internet, and the internet definitely ushered in sort of the next generation of leadership, because suddenly we had the tools for people to work remotely and to operate in a different way and to communicate asynchronously in a not unproductive way. So I think that ushered some of that in. But, first of all, I think people have to want to change, and they can't just pay change lip service, which is what I think is happening oftentimes with the old guard. They go along with something because the cultural conversation suggests they should, but they're not necessarily committed to it or interested in the true outcomes. And that's why we're seeing so many DEI initiatives getting abandoned right now, because 3 years ago we had a catastrophe in this country that caused organizations to feel like they were under a microscope, and they had to step up and change the internal reflection of that cultural conversation. And now we're hearing, oh, we don't actually have the money for that anymore. We're not going to do that anymore. And I think when you make a commitment to people about cultural change, not, I'm not suggesting, I mean, it will translate to the economics, but it's an investment first. And when you make that kind of commitment, you must stand by it. So I think, yes, change is possible, but people have to have the self-awareness to see how they fit and whether or not they're a barrier to that change.
That's amazing. That's an amazing answer, and you're dead on. I have one last question on everything you do. I could talk to you for the next 10 hours. But I got to get this one in because I love what you said earlier about we tend to hire people that we're feeling good, right? We feel good. I feel comfortable. How have you helped to shift that mindset, right? Because it is or does that still count a lot, right? Or are we looking at I love how you said also instead of judging, the person, let's judge them on their skills. And so how does that shifted when it comes to hiring? What's some advice for you there? Because that sounds to me like a whole shift.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I think we have to recognize when we're not showing up in that process aligned with those values or the future vision, the mission and vision of the organization. Because think about it, all of our vision and mission statements, vision is here, mission is always. Vision is, sorry, I was being visible. Mission, vision is the future. What are we striving to be? Mission is what we do to get there every day, what we are committed to every single day. And I think that we have to understand that the future of all business requires that we begin immediately to think differently. And the best way to include different thinking or challenge it's not different, it's just not yours. So challenging thinking or innovative thinking is to employ a diverse workforce and give them voice and opportunity. So I think we have to immediately challenge our hiring strategies. I think we have to immediately recognize the opportunity and align that opportunity with that vision. And the hiring strategy has to reflect that. And I think, it's so interesting to me that when we have these conversations, so many organizations go immediately to quotas. It's numbers, right?
It's not about that.
And
Yeah.
right. And I often say people aren't numbers, right? People aren't
Exactly.
numbers.
Yeah.
And, we have to have the ability to sort of honestly review our progress toward that future vision.
Yes.
And how our workforce reflects what we need to get there.
Yeah.
And what we need to get there is to accept that in a global economy, our organizations must reflect that global mindset. So that's sort of, my initial reaction to your question. But yes, we could probably talk about that for hours.
Yeah. No, that is so awesome. And that's a great answer. And it is a shift on how we hire today. I used to have this expression that I would tell my guys that would be hiring assistant managers when I was a district manager. Say, listen, man, do you want to have a conversation with yourself all day long? Why are you hiring somebody that's just like you? And sometimes that wasn't a male thing or a female thing. It was just, this person reminds me too much of you. Can you get a different opinion every day? I mean, I don't want to talk to myself for more than a few seconds every day. That's it.
Right. Absolutely.
Oh, Nancy, this has been amazing. How can people get your book? Tell us a little bit about your current book and then let us know how people can connect with you and pick up your book.
Sure. Well, thanks for asking. First of all, my current book is called Work Like a Boss, and the subtitle is thrilling. It's a kick in the pants guide to finding and using your power at work. And what it really does is promote leadership from all levels of the organization and self-accountability and self-awareness. And it kind of moves you through the awareness you need and then the tools that could be helpful to helping you move forward with this way of thinking. It's about eliminating fear of failure and recognizing that you have agency and that it's not your job or your title or your salary that gives you agency. And right now we need people to show up with agency, because the best ideas and the most innovative ideas come from everywhere. The book is called Work Like a Boss. You can find it at worklikeaboss.com, or anywhere they sell books. Amazon has it. You can buy it through my distributor. The book, and people seem to really love it. It's very accessible. It's a solid airplane read, and you walk away with usable tools that don't feel like they're too far away to pursue.
That is so awesome. Okay, I'm picking that up because I've got to know more here. Um, and how else can people work with you, connect and work with your company?
Sure. Thanks for asking. You can find my company at clockwork.com, or we have a smaller studio that does low code, no code development for startups and small to mid-sized businesses. That's called Tempo. And you can find that at madebytempo.com. Or you can find me at nancylyons.com, or on any of the socials at Nylons.
Okay.
So
Right. All right. Perfect. We'll make sure all of that is in the notes there.
thank you.
Nancy, you are amazing. Please continue to do what you're doing. Thank you. Please continue to do the work you're doing. You are really speaking to leaders that, especially leaders that are already in the workforce, of course, but leaders that are coming in. You are really giving such great advice on just that shift, man, just that shift. And I know you said the results are kind of the secondary thing, but they will come if they do all of the things that you talked about. So thank you so much for being, number one, so generous with your time today, but also number two, just imparting your experience and your wisdom, for us. So thank you so much.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's been a delight.
Oh, thank you. We're going to leave it there, folks. This has been Kenny, Nancy. This has been the Leading from the Middle podcast. We'll talk to you real soon.